On June 17th of 2022, Koroks would get his first Breath of the Wild any% world record. While many people simply viewed this as a world record improvement, this record was so much more than that. Another speedrunner, who goes by the name of Player5, had held the world record in any% for a year and a half, a streak of dominance that is almost unheard of in speedrunning, especially when you consider how popular this game really is. P5 would very quickly get a 24:10 of his own, but with 11 more seconds to shave off, it now became a question as to who would be the first to beat the game in under 24 minutes. Would Koroks shock the community again, or would P5 prove his dominance once more? Just 2 months later, P5 had managed to get this record that saved time in every single section of the run. Even though this time was achieved almost 3 years ago, only 7 people have been able to beat the game in under 24 minutes, which goes to show just how impressive this record really was. The main reason as to why Breath of the Wild is able to be completed so fast lies within your ability to go straight to Ganon's castle. With that being said, we will have to complete the Great Plateau first. Upon gaining access to Link, P5 clips out of the Shrine of Resurrection. Through some clever climbing alongside a technique that is known as whistle sprinting, he is able to make his way up this mountain. Whistling while sprinting allows for P5 to preserve his stamina, but a lot of the time, sprinting is merely a suggestion when you can do stuff like this.
Hello, Juju.
By doing this trick, P5 is able to make his way to this shrine. To complete the Great Plateau, we need to beat all 4 of its shrines. Each shrine gives Link a new ability, and so with this in mind, P5 goes to bombs first, as the bombs prove themselves to be the most useful throughout the run. Since we skipped activating this tower, we instead use this alternative method of getting into each shrine. Now remember that thing Link did with the pot earlier? Well, that trick is commonly referred to as Bow Lift Smuggling Slide, or BLSS. It is an imperative part of the run since it allows Link to travel long stretches of horizontal distance in a matter of seconds. It's also important to note that this trick can be pulled off with a plethora of items, but since P5 now has bombs at his disposal, he is able to BLSS whenever he pleases. Using BLSS, P5 makes his way to the next shrine, which is Magnesis. Upon entering the shrine, P5 will feed into his Pyromania by doing this. While BLSS allows Link to travel long stretches of horizontal distance, Wind Bombing allows Link to be launched astronomically high. Once this second shrine is completed, P5 will use Wind Bombing, BLSS, and Shield Clipping to finish off the Great Plateau. While we don't use all of our abilities throughout this run, we complete all 4 shrines anyway so that we can unlock the Paraglider and ultimately progress the game. With the Great Plateau finished, P5 must get a level 3 attack up meal alongside a sword, bow, and some ancient arrows, all of which will be used to fight Ganon later on. As you can see, speedrunners have to go through hell before they can fight Ganon. I will go into further detail about some of the castle's quirks later on, but for now, let's take a look at how P5 shreds his way through the final bosses. By shooting this arrow in the right spot, you are able to insta-kill Windblight Ganon during his first phase, as the arrow will get stuck and therefore do constant damage towards its head. Once this phase is over, P5 makes sure that he gets maximum use out of his gear. If he doesn't get maximum use out of his gear, then the run will most likely die due to a piece of gear breaking. If gear durability doesn't make things arduous enough, P5 then has to get lucky at the very end of Calamity Ganon's fight. This laser is integral when it comes to defeating Calamity Ganon, and in an ideal scenario, the laser will shoot itself towards Link instantaneously. Unfortunately, it is all too common for this to not be the case, but nonetheless, waiting a few seconds for the laser doesn't always kill the run. Once Calamity Ganon is finished, we have the ending sequence. In the wise words of P5, this section is essentially a glorified cutscene. This 2353 by P5 is the culmination of years upon years of effort. It goes without saying that it would take hours for me to explain how every single thing in this run came to be, but now that you have a rough idea of how this record was pulled off, I think it's about time. For the rest of 2022, P5's world record would remain on top. Remember, this record by P5 wasn't just any world record, it was a world record that saved time in every single segment when compared to the previous record. But once the beginning of 2023 rolled around, P5 was ready to push this record to its absolute limits, kicking off the year with a 2351. A few months later, P5 would improve the record by another second, and then a few weeks after that, Koroks would reclaim the record with another 1 second improvement. With Tears of the Kingdom being right around the corner, these two speedrunners put everything they could into Breath of the Wild. After all, an entire community of speedrunners switching over to a new Zelda game would cause Breath of the Wild's speedrunning scene to have a great plateau. Just 1 week before the release of Breath of the Wild's beloved sequel, P5 was able to pull off a record he was finally satisfied with, getting a time of 23:42. While there were a few optimizations sprinkled into this run, a bulk of this run's time save over the 23:53 came from Windblight Ganon. Not only was there a faster strategy implemented for phase 2 of the fight, but Windblight's skip itself had been optimized, with P5 implementing a setup that required less hops, allowing for this arrow to be positioned faster. Even though this record was most certainly improvable, the release of this game caused a gigantic halt in world record progression. After what was almost a year of Tears of the Kingdom, P5 finally makes the decision to go back to Breath of the Wild, and on March 18th of 2024, he achieved the first ever sub 2340, getting a time of 23:36. With a faster wind bomb in the Stasis Shrine, alongside a wind bomb to Cryonis that saves time over using stasis on this object, it was clear that P5 was trying to implement every single strategy he could. Within that following week, he'd bring the world record down 2 more times, eventually ending up at a 23:23. But even if there are faster wind bombs, faster scope clips, faster shrine clips, faster setups, faster castle movement, and faster boss fights, there is one more thing you need in order to get an amazing Breath of the Wild run, and that is luck. As I mentioned earlier on, it is ideal that you get an instant laser when fighting Calamity Ganon, but this is not the only place in which luck matters. When P5 is preparing for Hyrule Castle, he uses an amiibo to spawn in fish that will later be used for his attack up meal. As you might imagine, the quality of these amiibo scans can vary. We then have to take into consideration that the game's loads vary a bit from run to run. You'd think that load times wouldn't make much of a difference if speedrunners still chose to count them as part of their final time, but if you remember one of the very first world records I mentioned in this video, the difference between P5's 2410 and Koroks' 2410 can very much be attributed towards varying load times. Finally, there is luck when it comes to the gear you pick up. While the gear itself is pretty consistent, weapons such as the Royal Claymore have a chance of having some sort of attack up modifier. For instance, this Royal Claymore used to defeat Calamity Ganon has a 1 in 40 chance of there being an attack up modifier. So even if you play through the entire run with no mistakes, there is still a chance that you can get screwed over, making it almost impossible to play close to this game's best theoretical time. Speaking of which, some community members are working on segmenting a new best theoretical time for any percent, and so if you want to learn more about that, I'd highly recommend subscribing to Surprise Pika. But as far as the quest for 22 is concerned, it was looking like this minute barrier could barely be broken with the right combination of luck and skill. 1 month would pass and P5 remained on top. 2 months would pass and P5 remained on top. Next thing you know, it had now been 6 months and P5's 23-23 was still at the tippity top of the leaderboard. If there's one thing you should know about P5, it's that he is a fucking machine. All dungeons world record? Check. All main quests world record? Check. All shrines world record? Check. 100% world record? Check. Tears of the Kingdom world record holder? Check. If P5 wasn't running any percent, then there's a good chance he was running something else, meaning that he was always getting better at the game, even if he wasn't doing his usual world record attempts. Koroks would finally catch up, beating P5 with a time of 23-22, which was then followed up by a 23-17 a few weeks later. With the exception of there being 7 seconds lost in Stasis, alongside 16 seconds lost in Castle, this run was just about as good as it can get, given the strategies Koroks was going for. A 16-second time loss may seem drastic, especially for a run that is only 23 minutes long, but we have to keep in mind that it is damn near impossible to get a perfect castle in the run. Since you need an absurd amount of skill and luck to pull off a perfect castle, players will always lose a few seconds here, even if they play well. So even if Koroks had 25 seconds of feasible time save, getting all 25 of those seconds is simply not a realistic goal to have, especially considering the fact that we still have to worry about the rest of the run. With that being said, the quest for 22 was starting to become a reality, with P5 getting this run 2 days after the 23-17. While P5 had managed to capitalize on all of the time loss in Stasis, that doesn't change the fact that either runner was going to have to play the second and arguably more difficult half of the run to near perfection. While 10 seconds stood in the way of the elusive 22, there would be one more strategy that players would implement into the run, and that was none other than this shield clip. By shield clipping into the Temple of Time, we are able to get to this pot 5 seconds quicker, assuming everything is done optimally. Even though this trick is arduous, it was also at the beginning of the run, and so with this strategy now being in P5's arsenal, he would officially begin his quest for sub 23 on February 1st of 2025. For hours every day, he would stream his attempts to hundreds of viewers, with the hope of finally breaking one of Breath of the Wild's biggest barriers. Week 1, no 22. Week 2, no 22. But on week 3, things were a little bit different. Going into the final segment of the run, P5's best possible time was at 22:59. He had narrowly missed his goal, but considering that this run had a much cleaner castle in comparison to the Great Plateau, there was very much hope to be had. After beating the game in 23 minutes, 109 times, Player 5 had finally beaten the game in 22 minutes for the first time. You can really see how hard P5 worked for this time. After all, the breaking of this minute barrier took 48 days of grinding, and that doesn't even include the years of knowledge he had to gain prior to attempting something like this. There really is no overstating how incredible this really is, but like all other records, this one shall fall too.